worked with a professor that made judgments about the students on the first day. He said, wow, this guy's really smart, that guy's not so good, he shouldn't even be in college. And he would make those comments to colleagues at the first week of class, like, I've got this guy, he shouldn't even be in college. And I think what we're looking for is a teaching process that doesn't make those judgments up front, but instead says what every individual has to say is valuable. Just because someone doesn't look like the smartest cracker in the box doesn't mean that they're not valuable and that you can't learn something from what they have to say. Social justice considers prior learning experiences, how and what people learned. It recognizes that every individual can make positive change in their own lives and around them. And it recognizes that how we teach needs to be relevant to the realities outside of the classroom, that there's not really a wall between the outside world and what we experience in the classroom. What we do in the classroom is part of the real world, and our role is to maybe do the following things. The article says we need to teach our students to find fact rather than just opinions, that we need to help students figure out their own opinions and to understand that other people's opinions might be different, and to interpret information and facts in order to form their own conclusions. So I think the discussion today could center on some of those things that we have the power to change in the classroom. For example, what do you all do to create opportunities for your students to voice their opinions? Is there something in your material or in your platform that allows them to voice their own opinions about things? Feel free, speak up.
I use reflections.
What's that?
Sorry, hold on. I use reflections. I teach a variety of a lot of HR, but I give them topics. You know, we try to study the topics, but then I give them reflections so they can express how they feel about specific topics. For example, diversity and inclusion, or you know, global awareness, because I'm trying to get them to understand. And I also bring in speakers to give them different points of view, so that they base their education not just what the textbook says or just what they read in the newspaper or read on social media. You know, I try to give them a wide variety and let them express themselves.
Do you do that in conversations or in discussions online, or how do you do that?
All of the above. We do it in discussions. We do it in, they write reflection papers. They're just really short, where I'll give them a prompt or I'll give them some questions, and they, you know, they just tell me what they're thinking, and then we discuss it. You know, are they on target? Are they not on target? Are they, you know, where are they getting their opinions from? One of the other things I do, because I teach a capstone AS course, and one of the things I want them to understand before they leave their AS program is that they know where their information comes from and the validity of it. So I invite in our library to speak to them, and it always is crazy to me that so many of them have never used the college library the whole time they've been in school. So, you know, I introduce them to that topic, and a lot of our students stick around for their bachelor's degree. So I introduce them to, you know, a resource, but you know, we want them to understand that not all information sources are, you know, valid, and we want them to be able to judge those for themselves. So we go through an, you know, information literacy section where we actually discuss this and try to get them to understand why someone might write an article.
Thank you, Martina. Layla, I saw you also had raised your hand when the question first came up. Do you also do things to promote discussion of ideas in your classroom?
Not much, honestly. I teach biology, general biology, and anatomy and physiology one, and both of them are heavy courses in terms of the educational material that we need to communicate with the students, communicate to the students. So we hardly discuss any other topics than biology in my classes. But I always encourage them to ask questions. And some of them might say, oh, this might be a stupid question or something. So I tell them no question is stupid. So I always encourage them to ask questions, but unfortunately, we don't go outside of the biology atmosphere.
I have a question about biology, because one of the things that they say in here, one of the concepts that applies to social justice as well to other things, is the idea of making your own connections between different concepts and seeing how they relate to each other. I would imagine in the sciences that's something that you do, right? That there are concepts that relate to each other that may be different, and that one of the things I guess I'm asking the question, is that part of teaching sciences, that's seeing how a new study might change how people see things, for example, or?
Yeah, I apologize. I always read the articles provided, but this time it's a hectic week. So today I have 4 meetings. Anyway, this is not an excuse anyway. Yeah, we asked them to give us like examples from their daily life about the scientific topic we are talking about. Such as, for example, we talk about the characteristics of water. It has many characteristics that make it suitable for life on Earth. So we get many examples, like why soap, for example, why do you use soap to wash dishes when you cook bacon, for example? Why water alone doesn't work by itself. It's like those characteristics of matter that are related to life, but not to our social connection.
But that's important, because valuing what the student already knows and showing them that they already have information that they can share with others, that creates improved learning experiences, for example, where they feel like what they say is important in the process of learning in the classroom, is part of creating equality in the classroom, where everybody has daily experiences with water. Nobody is, you know what I'm saying, we all have those experiences, and allowing students to talk about things that are related to their personal lives gives them a voice that maybe they didn't know they had. And that's part of social justice, even in the sciences.
One more example, like yesterday, our lecture is about the system. The system is like a group of things that act as one unit. So I gave them like, our class is a system, because when we meet for biology, we talk about the same topics. We share among each other questions, answers, anything related to biology. So we make a system as a whole. And I always encourage them to ask questions. I don't talk much about evolution, even though I am a scientist, but not a strong believer in evolution. But I convey the scientific message to them. I tell them this is what we have in science. So it's like, it is your belief, whether you believe or not in these scientific in this scientific information. But yeah, mainly biology, and as you said, we connect it to daily life, but we don't go into judgments or discrimination, or it's like a safe classroom environment.
Yeah. Do any of the other of you teach in areas where so the social aspects of life are part of the material that you teach?
I can chime in here. There's a lot to this because I teach in a bachelor completion. So the students, it's nursing. So the students are already nurses and they're out there in the field. And the bachelor completion is more focused on communication, leadership, critical thinking, judgment. And the previous place where I worked, I loved the mission. The mission was to leverage the voice of nursing through research and education. And I tell students that, you know, you all have experience here, and what this is teaching them, you made a very good point about the voice. In order to be heard, you need to be able to support what you're saying. And we have nurses, we have assignments where anything that they say, you can't, not can't, but we encourage that if you're going to speak with a platform, that you're able to back it up. Example is, I would tell students when they first come into the program anyways, I say that, you know, you all have really good ideas of what might work, and you'll be in a multidisciplinary group. You're sitting at a table with multiple disciplines. If you want to be heard, you have to speak with substance. You have to back it up. So you can say, Mrs. Smith in room 3 has this problem. I think this would work. And they'd say, that's very nice. Hold that thought. But if you said that the Cleveland Clinic just completed this study and these findings are similar to Mrs. Smith's situation, it might work on her. They'd say, tell me more. Because any decisions that are made in medicine and healthcare need to be supported by evidence. And you've seen this, and you talk about with students, giving students a chance to be able to present themselves. One time a student, this was a graduate actually program or project where it came up with the question of, does oxygen benefit patients with acute MI, with acute myocardial infarction, heart attack? Mm-hmm. And it sounded like but this student was a very bright student. So you had to ask her questions of why you chose that question for your graduate project. And I did a little homework myself and found that there were animal studies that were done. You do appreciate this with the biology, that there were animal studies on the negative feedback loop that would actually constrict vessels if you gave somebody oxygen who really didn't need it. And even though this, you know, it did not change the policy. It was how she wrote it up. She wrote it up so well that she actually got the research award at graduation. Wow. So whereas it could have gone a completely different way for a question such as that. So in order to move forward, you challenge the status quo, but it's what we're teaching our students is how to communicate that where you're going to be heard, and it's done in a respectful way. If I can just briefly say what else I used to do to encourage discussion. So I would actually start out with a philosophy, scenario, and how, depending on how you would address that situation, looking at the greater good or the moral right, and how together the golden mean. You're not completely to the extreme one way or the other, that the golden mean. So we do have views that overlap. And for this reason, we really need, in order to solve problems, we really need to listen to what other people have to say. And for that, it opened it up so someone could kind of say something that was off, something a little bit you wouldn't expect, and could back it up a little bit. So you do have to I do encourage to bring up things that may not be as conventional.
Yeah, I think you've hit on two of the major points of social justice in the classroom. The last one you just did is that when you talk about diverse aspects of something that may appear to be not quite related, and you find a way to relate it to what you're talking about. When you might be talking about human health, but a study on animals might seem like it doesn't apply, or maybe it does. And making those kind of connections, allowing people to say, well, I took a class in something completely unrelated, but this aspect of that is related to what we're talking about. Brings a broader understanding, I think, and allows people to use their own background, their own learning, to bring something new and unique to the conversation. I like that you pointed that out. I mean, your examples were very different than what I just gave, but that's important. And I think, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Can I just add one more thing? When you spoke about bringing in so many different things, our students are all nursing, going for the same degree, but they might be in community health, corrections, ER, peds, geriatrics, primary care, OR. They could be in all different things, but the assignments that you have and the concepts you're working with incorporates everyone, because it's problem solving, communication skills. And one of my courses I just added, I can't wait to see how this works out. I just added an assignment where they build a concept map. They're going to take the 3 main concepts or components of their final project, and they're going to plug it into this concept map all together. They're going to work on it like a wiki, like up in a Google Docs. So they're going to build it, and what they're going to see is that everything that they do is somehow connected to everyone else, no matter what your field is. I don't know if we've heard of I think it's called 7 degrees of separation. It's where everyone is connected. That's fascinating. So I will stop so that others.
Okay, but you also, in the first part of what you said, you brought up another very important point, and that is that you're engaging your students beyond the classroom. You're talking to them about what's happening on the job, or what's going to happen if you present this because you're working on a case at a hospital and you have an idea. Making that connection to how what they're doing in your classes relates to what they're doing on the job is huge. And I don't know how many fields, or I'm saying this wrong. I don't know how many instructors connect what's in their classroom to what's outside of the classroom, but I think it's possible in every field. I teach foreign language, and one of the first assignments I give is to find somebody who speaks Spanish in your neighborhood in one of your other classes, and ask them what the most common greetings and goodbyes are that they use. What do you usually say when you run into your Spanish-speaking friends? Because our first lesson is how to say hi and goodbye. And for some reason, hearing it from someone else in another class, or someone who lives down the street from them, or a friend that they have, makes it feel more real than just reading about it in a textbook. And suddenly it becomes not just something I have to learn because it's required, but something that I can use in the real world, that other people use in the real world, that can make me feel closer to people, that can make me feel more connected to people. And they find that in those discussions, it's more meaningful. Even simple things can become more profound when they become part of connecting with other people in the world around you. So that kind of engaging in what happens outside of the classroom, I think, is very important. And for me, it's a conversational thing, it's a speaking thing. But for people in sciences, maybe, or I don't know what some of the other topics we have here are, what fields we have here, but how do the rest of you engage outside of the classroom? How do you, I guess what I want to say is, how do you produce the knowledge and the recognition that people can make a difference, change things, connect with people, make things better by sending them out of the classroom into the real world with the material that you're working on? I'm not sure I'm being clear, so I want to give an example. For example, let's take what Roberta said. She has nursing students and they're working on a certain project, and she encouraged her student to write a paper that went on to be recognized and was valuable. Is that right? That there was a connection there?
I'm sorry, I was hang on a minute.
No, it's okay. But I, for example, have my students do volunteer work when we have an international fest in downtown Square. And we have people from all different countries who set up booths. And I send my Spanish students to volunteer and help at those booths where people speak different languages. And they all come back saying, this was an amazing experience. I learned so many things. And they were so happy to get to know me and to work with them. And so we made real connections. And they felt that what they did made a difference. We decorate for a local assisted living facility for Thanksgiving. We have a pizza party and we do travel presentations about Spanish-speaking countries. And the elderly citizens say, we're so glad you came. You made our life so much better. And it makes young people who sometimes feel like, oh God, I'm just in this class because I have to be in here, open their eyes and see that, look at this, all I had to do was come put up a few decorations and talk a little bit about what it would be like to go to Mexico, even though I've never been there. And this group of people think that I'm amazing, that I'm so helpful, and I'm so, they come back from that experience saying, wow, I had no idea I could make that much difference in an old person's life. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if the rest of you make those kinds of outreaches. Martina, I see you've turned your mic off.
I wanted to say that's experiential learning. And one of the ways to do that is through service learning and through what we have at Polk is called community-based learning. And we have classes that do similar to what you're talking about. We actually have an English class that goes into an assisted living facility. Prior to COVID, they did this. Now they have to do it all virtually. But prior to COVID, these students 4 times in their ENC 1101 class would go into an assisted living facility. Instead of writing about themselves, they'd write stories about that these elderly people told them. And it had such an incredible impact that the last class I attended, because I would go and kind of be the fly on the wall to observe, because the teacher's amazing. I literally went, because the teacher had a family emergency, so I went and I was listening. I had to do absolutely nothing. These students organized food for the elderly. They, they organized their groups to talk. It was huge. They took so much responsibility, and they were so, it built their confidence, and it made them understand why writing is so important. It made them understand that they don't always just need to talk about themselves and tell their own stories, but telling other people's stories are very valuable. And a lot of them would go back and write family stories because then they saw the meaning in it. I think that that's the thing that a lot of our classes are missing, is that experiential piece. And one of the things, because I'm the internship person at my college, so I have to speak about experiential learning. Just having a student who wants to become a lawyer, sit down with a lawyer and talk to a lawyer and begin to network, or go to a chamber event, or we just did this thing, all the schools in our county work together. So we just did this week-long career readiness event where they got to network with different businesses in our community. It wasn't a career fair. It was more, they would teach a session on resume writing, and then they would have an opportunity to talk to the employer about what they were looking for. I think connecting them with people outside of their own, their own little group is very important. And I think it builds their confidence, and it makes them more sure that they can go out there and do that. So I think there's it makes them better citizens, better global citizens. I cannot express, you can see my passion. I get so excited. And Sherry Seiler, who's on this call, that she was one of the first people that did anything like this. And what she did is she teaches
Actually, Martina, if Sherry's here, could she tell us about her experiences?
I think she closed off her video. That's why I was going to bring it up.
Oh, okay. Sherry, are you there? Would you like to tell us about your experience with this? Okay, Martina, tell us.
She teaches this writing course, and what they did was, instead of them actually, you know, doing just lessons, they actually would divide in nonprofits and organizations because it's a professional writing class. So they actually have to learn how to write, you know, like SOPs and policy manuals and stuff like that. So they would, instead of them just doing, you know, homework, they would invite in these people and they would actually put together documentation on for these different community groups. And I was running the volunteer program for the college at that time. And I went in and presented, and these kids put together amazing stuff that until our volunteer program closed down, we used all this material that our own students made up. So, I mean, they have pride in that. You know, I did that, like you were saying. It's a huge thing to them.
It's empowering, isn't it? Gives them the power to see the connection between where they are, perhaps not having the job that they're shooting for yet, and not quite sure how they get from step 1 to step 10. And I think seeing those connections is very important.
It builds their skills, and it also builds their skills, but it also builds their connections. And building those connections to me is so important, because when I have had several students that have worked at a tutoring center, for example, and then have wanted to do something else. And the person at the tutoring center's husband worked someplace, and they were able to find them a job or get them a scholarship or find something else for them. And I just think that's so, like you said, empowering, because they're doing it. It's through their works.
Mm-hmm. One of the things in social justice in the classroom is the idea of empowering students to recognize and believe that they can make change. And we've been talking a lot so far about academic issues. So I want to kind of just push this in a little bit of a different direction. How do we go about, whether you're doing it or not doing it, what are the ideas that you have as a group that empower students to recognize their own abilities, their own ability to use their voice, their own ability to take action, to be an example, and to make a change? How do we encourage that in the classroom? What do we do to get students to begin to recognize their own power? Anybody? I have an example if you want to hear my example, but what do you think? I'd like to hear from you all first. Let's see.
I can say something.
Sure, Leila.
Before we transition to the online teaching, I used to have like study groups in my classes. I ask like the good students and the material who have good performance in the class to lead a study group, a help session for their peers, but outside the classroom. So it has been successful until we got to move online. Now, 2 of my students whom I taught last year, they were meeting with me, discussing the material they will discuss with their peers, taking attendance of the students who attend the help sessions, and they were meeting 1 hour before the class time. And they did really, really a good job. Now, they have started at the college a club. It's called the Shrubs, the Scrubs, sorry. The Scrubs, to help the students to go to the medical field, like pre-health or health professions. And
so they're making a positive change on your campus.
Yeah, and they invited a nurse, and today at 12 is their first meeting. So I'm so excited that, and they sent me an email. It almost put me to tears, because last week they said, because of my help and encouragement to them, and I always tell them, you're good. And one of them was scared of standing in front of the students. So that encourages her to go to express herself, and even to start this club that is, I asked her, is it recognized by the college? She said, yeah, it is registered and everything is official.
That's good.
our treatment to the students, I mean, by encouraging them, they just want one word. I mean, you have to believe in yourself and you're good.
That can be true.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and one
We,
other student was recognized by the NISAD, National Institute for some development, educational development. And they ask students to write like a letter every year about somebody who made a difference in their life. So I asked him to lead a study group, and he was so shy, and he expressed his, I mean, that he's afraid, he's not very self-confident. And I kept encouraging him. And finally, he led a study group because he was good in the material. I want him to help the others in biology. But, and finally, he didn't win the award, but they sent him a letter that his letter was outstanding, but he didn't make it. And those people are always in touch with me. They keep in touch, telling me about their progress. And they reach higher degrees. One of them is applying for a PhD in nursing. So it's like, it's very empowering to us as well when we see our students that who were, I mean, very shy. And that student didn't make it at UCF, his GPA, so probably his parents want him to get an education, so he was enrolled in Seminole State. And he said, I didn't even want to be in the class in the first day, but because of our encouragement to them and these things, so he got to where he got. I mean, now he's finishing his bachelor degree in engineering.
You know, I think recognizing that even students who appear not to want to lead have the power to lead can make a big difference. And I think that giving everybody the chance to talk, giving everybody the chance to voice their opinion makes a big difference. In foreign languages, when you're talking about what people in other countries do, it's very easy to fall into generalities and stereotypes. So sometime early in the semester, it's always really important to talk about that issue, which I think is a larger issue in the world, and that is, what is a generality and when can they be used in a positive way, and when do they become stereotypes and be used in a negative way. But instead of talking about cultures or races or ethnicities, we talk about the stereotype of normality. And we have a big discussion about, what do you think is normal? Because normal is a discussion we all understand. We all understand that there's all kinds of things that people think is normal, but nobody meets all the requirements of normal. So when we have that talk, everybody has a chance to say, well, my family thinks that it's normal for people to go to school. It's normal for this to happen. And somebody else can say, well, what's normal in my neighborhood is it's normal that young people start using drugs early, and that's not a good thing. And normal can go into any area, any topic, and every single person has something to say about what's normal. And it becomes a practice not in what's right or what's wrong or what's normal or what's not normal, but it's the first practice in, how do we have a discussion where we all see things differently, and how do we respect other people's opinion, even if their opinion is different than our opinion. And that's a difficult thing to do in the classroom. It's difficult to get people to listen calmly when someone argues a point that they disagree with. Here's another example. We had a situation where we were planning a Day of the Dead informational presentation. That's interesting because it's just coming up. Dia de Muertos is coming up here at the end of the month in just less than a couple of weeks. And it is a practice that falls on the same day as Halloween. People paint their faces like skulls in Mexico. Maybe you've heard of Day of the Dead. And when we decided to do a presentation, everybody was allowed to pick their own topic. Everybody was going to present something. We actually had an evening class, so we were going to invite families, fellow students, anybody who wanted to come. We were having a party and a presentation. And several students came to me and said, we're Christians, we're fundamental Christians. We think celebrating Halloween is wrong, that dressing like devils and evils is wrong, and we don't want to participate in this. And I found a solution, but before I tell you what it was, I want to ask, what would you do in that situation? What is socially just in that situation? What would you do? Marcia, what would you do in that situation? You're not a teacher. I want to hear what you would say.
What would I do in that situation? Well, I think you hear them. That's the first thing. Acknowledge that this is an issue for them, and find out what they would be comfortable, how they would feel comfortable participating. Maybe it's not in that particular activity, but there is something else that they would feel comfortable participating in. If this is something that you want the class or the group to experience. And I think there are different definitions of participation. Maybe they observe rather than participate. So I think you have a dialogue with them to see what they are comfortable with, that will still allow you and them to get to the goal of the class or whatever the activity is. That's what I would have done.
And that's exactly what I did. I said, your point is as valid as any point. So everybody has selected a topic or an area within a topic. Why don't we also have a presentation of why Christians don't celebrate this? You can pick which activities you think fall in line with what you believe. You can say which activities don't fall in line with what you believe and why you choose not to participate in that. That's just the other side of the same picture. That's a great idea. So we did. We kind of alternated back and forth. We had some people present, this is what people believe. They believe the spirits of the dead come back, and they make small altars. And then somebody else came up and said, we think that, painting faces like skulls is, inappropriate. And then somebody else presented, and I was very selective in how I ordered things. And then somebody else presented how the Mexican idea of death is not so scary, that it's a celebration of the lives of the people who've passed, and that the Mexican culture is not like anti-death. They make jokes about death. They're more comfortable with death. They accept death as a more, less scary, more, celebration of life rather than, cry because someone has passed. Not to say that people don't cry or miss people that pass, but it became a very positive event because everybody felt that their opinion was valued. And those students who had the bravery, I want to say, to come to the teacher and say, I don't believe in and can't support this topic. Can I say something about what I believe about this topic based on my faith, which is different? And instead of saying, no, that's not valid, no, we don't want to hear what you have to say, I made a choice, even though I kind of was unhappy that they didn't want to participate. You don't have to believe it to talk about it, is what I wanted to say. I made a decision to say, no, I think that's fine. Let's do it. And it was fairly early in my teaching career, and it was a big lesson to me because it changed the whole atmosphere in the class. Because the word just got out, like, in this class, we can disagree. We can present our own point of view. What we say makes a difference. If we say this isn't right, she gives us a chance to tell us why. And even if she disagrees, she still lets us speak. And some of the students, I think, really needed that. Even if they were the ones who disagreed with the Christian point of view, they still felt good because they said it doesn't matter if we disagree, we still have the power to speak. And so I was really happy with that in the long run. And I think that allowing people to have opinions different than your own matters in the classroom. Do you ever, Roberta, go ahead. You raised your hand.
What I was going to point out was about change. You spoke about change, and that I think as educators, one of the things that students, it's not just information of topics and definitions. Students need to come away with tools. That particular experience you just described was actually something that they can apply to other situations. But one of the things we have is a change project in one of our courses, and it's and the students are looking at, they look at evidence-based practice models, which also talk about change, but that's not a change theory in itself. And when we think of change, you can think of it as a broad section, but when you actually have to take it down to the steps you would use to actually make a change or promote a change, they don't always have that toolkit. They don't always have those steps. So it's really, the word change can be much more complex if it can be broken down to the steps of motivating. And what environment do you have to create, then what steps do you have to take. So changes can be very complex, and that's why I love models for anything, ethical decision making. I love models because they give you those steps, and maybe it's a way that I learn. Maybe I'm bringing it along, but I find that when students are given steps and then practice those steps in an assignment, then they can apply it to more complex things in their workplace, whatever.
Here's another way to empower students, and that is if you make an error and a student points out that your theory is off, or that you have made a mistake and they want to correct it, or they have more information that you didn't have. How do you handle that? Do you accept that information? Do you allow a student to expand on what you're saying and possibly correct what you're saying? Are you willing to say, yes, you know more than I do? How many of you are willing to do that in the classroom? Yeah. I can't see everybody. I wish I knew how to get everybody on my screen, but all right, it seems like everybody says yes. I think that's one of the most important ways that we can tell students that your voice is just as powerful as the person who has all the power in this classroom. Leila.
I always I also thank them for pointing that out to me. I say, oh my gosh, well, I don't know, why did I make such a mistake? This, if I know the answer. And sometimes I daydream or my mind shifts or something. But if I don't know the answer, I tell them, because in science we have hypotheses and theory and these things, I tell them, well, my hypothesis based on my educational information, my educational guess is so and so, the answer to your question. But I have to research it and we'll get back to you with the answer. Or you can research it too and we can discuss it later. I have no problem saying that I don't know. I don't know everything in biology. I mean, it's a huge field. And
oh, absolutely.
Like one student once asked me, why would the insect die? When it dies, it flips on its back. I mean, how in the world I would know that? I'm not interested in insects anyway. So I said, oh my gosh, that's really a good question. It seems you are very observant. You observe the nature, which is really good. So we encourage them even though we don't know the answer. And I looked up the answer and I answered her the next time I saw her. So it's normal for me.
That's good.
It's like, okay, I'm human like you. I mean, what can I do?
How many of you have had an experience like this one? I believe that I'm an expert on Spanish grammar. I actually know more Spanish grammar than a lot of native Spanish speakers who don't study grammatical rules. And I was explaining something, and a young lady from Mexico argued with me, and she said, no, that's not right. It's not called an accent, it's called a tilde. Everything that you call an accent is called a tilde. And I'm like, no, a tilde is the squiggly line that you put over an N in Spanish. That's a tilde. All of the lines like this are called accents. And she said, no, I'm sure I'm right. So I went home and, doggone it, she was absolutely right. And so it was a little bit of humble pie to come back to class and say, yep, she was right. I want everybody to know I'm the one who made the mistake. And from now on, I'm going to get it right. And that was a kind of a tough bullet to bite, because I had seriously defended my, position and indicated that I really thought she was wrong. And it was hard to come back and say, nope, you were right, I was wrong. But I think those things are really important, so that students can see that it's, as adults in the workplace, as we meet as faculty, as we have meetings, as we talk about changes and things. Just for example, how are we dealing with diversity and social issues on our campuses? Our campus is forming a new diversity committee. We're looking at social issues. We're talking about change. What do we need to change? Reviewing what we do, and looking at ourselves to see if we've made a mistake in how we handle ourselves, a mistake in our hiring practices, or a mistake in how we promote things on campus. And I think that teaching students that they can speak up and point out mistakes and make positive change and make things better is a valuable tool. Martina, you talked a little bit about a process for teaching how to make a change, or a change project. I'm interested in knowing, what are some specific steps toward teaching students how to make change? Because the article that we read talks a lot about how important it is for students to recognize they can make change. But you're right. What are the steps to making a positive change? I'm not sure I know.
Well, they're very definite. It's something that we teach in our class. It's just like we teach decision making. We teach how they can change if that's what they want to do. But I think sometimes they have it within them. They know what it is they want to do, but they're masking it because they're not confident enough to speak out, or confident enough to take that action, or confident enough to, make that connection. So I think some of it is building them up to make them realize that they do have a voice. But we want to make them think. We want to make them be able to process thought, not just to accept what's given to them. And we want to make them understand how they're building their ideas, and is it really, based on good factual information, or is it just based on, stuff that they've learned online? My daughter is infamous for watching Facebook, and when people make these outlandish statements or promote things that are incorrect, she's really good about saying, well, where did you hear that? Is that did you have a valid source for that? And that's, as instructors, I think that's what's so important, is that we get them to question where it came from. Is it a personal belief? And if it's a personal belief, what did they base it on? One of our statistics teachers who did community-based learning brought in the supervisor of elections, and went through the whole process, so to educate the students about supervisor elections and how the whole process works. And then the whole semester talked about statistics, and how statistics can be manipulated, how statistics can be swayed, how basically you can say, this is what I want my result to be, and you can use statistics to support that. Is that valid? No, that's not valid. But, he did a great job, phenomenal job on getting them educated about something like the voting system, and you actually had them build their own survey, and the supervisor of elections allowed them to vote on it with other students to show them the whole process, how it works. But I think that's what's so important, and I think as instructors, we need to make them think. I loved Arsenio Hall used to say in his program, things that make me go, and I agree with that. We want to make them walk out of our classes not secure in everything and knowing everything, but thinking, being thinking adults.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I teach processes for them to actually look at information and try to, understand where it came from and where they form those opinions. And sometimes they change their opinions. Sometimes just through reflections, or like you were talking about the Day of the Dead. When I first heard about the Day of the Dead, I was scared. But when you learn about the actual culture behind it, and I've been to Mexico several times, and you learn about the people and the fact that Mexicans they're not about the individual, they're about the community. It becomes something totally different. It's a community celebration of the people that went before. But until you understand that, you can make opinions. It's just what you like and what you don't like. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting point that it's easy to make a superficial judgment. It's harder to delve underneath and find out what is happening. What's the real story? What's the whole story? Maybe we never know the whole story, but at least the process of wanting to know why things are done the way they are is important. I want to, just because we only have a few minutes left, I want to make sure that we've touched on each of the ideas here. We've talked about valuing what individuals bring to the classroom. We've talked about the power for making positive change. We've talked about allowing students to lead in creating new situations or change for the fellow students. We've talked about what's it called? X is something learning? Oh, Lord, my English. Experiential learning, and how connecting what's going on in the classroom to what's happening in the real world makes it more valuable and meaningful to students. We've talked a little bit about discerning fact from opinion. We've talked about creating opportunities for students to hear voices. I think the one thing that we haven't touched on is teaching how to have a civil discussion. Do any of you do things in your class specifically geared toward teaching people how to listen and respond respectfully to each other? Roberta, is that something that you work on in your classes?
Well, I was in our discussions. I do encourage that that there isn't right and wrong answers, and I do kind of point that out in the instructions. There was I would do a networking. It was like a speed dating activity, but it was a networking activity, and people had like 1 minute, and then it actually went down to like 45 seconds, and you kept switch, where they had to introduce themselves and they had to listen. And in other words, that was one thing. The other thing, there was an activity that I did one time where people had to finish somebody else. Start the sentence. It was an activity where someone says a sentence and your next sentence has to begin with the last word of that sentence that they ended with, and so on. So you had to listen to their full sentence before you even could say your next sentence. But they all had to kind of link together, such as, there was a common thing about how to make, about dinners at holidays or something. So what would happen is the conversation would go way off on, because people had such a difficult time doing it. So it's an exercise where two people together are talking. One can't say their next sentence till the other one finishes their first sentence, because their sentence needs to start with the last word of. And those are just exercises of how to listen.
That's a good idea, because I think that's the problem we have a lot. People are not listening to what other people have to say because it's not reinforcing their own beliefs, they don't want to hear it. I think we see that in the wider world today. That's become a big problem, that each person is loudly saying their own opinion without listening. Look at our presidential debates. We had interruptions round and round and round, and it was difficult to watch, painful to watch, disrespectful conversation like that.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just if we're talking about interrupting, sorry. Can I briefly just, there was another on learning how to nonverbal and verbal communication. It was an exercise where students had to videotape themselves for 2 minutes talking to somebody about it. It was a serious topic. I had to do it anyways. And then they had to watch this at least 3 times, and they had to look at they're looking at themselves, or videotaping themselves, of what their nonverbals were when they were speaking and when they were listening. They had to look at their nonverbals of their heads and their upper body, of their lower body, their tone, how their tone would change, their pace would change. They had to completely analyze how that they spoke, and it was on advanced directives, because when you go in to speak to a patient on something, your nonverbals, it's teaching them how your nonverbals really say a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's about our time for today. Is there anybody who'd like to make a closing remark? Had something they wanted to add and still didn't have a chance to do? No? All right. I thank you very much for being here. We don't have a topic picked for next week, and some of you are regulars to these conversations. So if there's a topic that you think is important that you would like to address, just send me a quick email on the invite. Yes, Roberta.
Can I just point out that in the chat box, I had the empathy. If anybody's ever heard of the Cleveland Clinic video on empathy, I really just, even just look up Cleveland Clinic empathy, and the video come up. It's an amazing video on empathy that Cleveland Clinic.
Right, and the actual website is in the chat.
It's in the chat.
Link, yeah.
The full link to it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. I know as we get to heading toward the middle and end of the semester, it gets busier and busier. So I appreciate you all for taking the time to come and participate in this discussion. It's always good to see you here. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
So, hey guys. Marcia, I wanted to run something past you before we go. I talked to Charlie about this for a minute, but our local chapter of the AFC is hosting a Zoom meeting on a Tuesday at 12:30, where we are having someone from the League of Women Voters explain the amendments to the Florida Constitution that are on the ballot, because I was just wondering if the week that they're doing that, which is Tuesday the 27th, Tuesday the 27th of October, so that's in about a week and a half. Right, thank you. If we could use that Tuesday as our roundtable. Okay. And actually, I'm in a crunch spot myself right now. If we could, I know that then also the week after that, we're going to have to move to a Tuesday, or we're going to have to start doing some Tuesdays because you have conference coming up.
Right. The week of conference is November the 16th through the 20th. And the Thursday before, the 12th and the 13th, those days we are leaving open for any commissions that need to have business board meetings. Right. So for those 2 weeks, well, the week of conference, you can't meet. At least we won't be able to. We won't be able to provide the Zoom because we're going to be zoomed out. But the week prior, that's why I offered the 10th. If you were willing to move to Tuesday the 10th, that will work for us.
What I'm thinking is maybe what we could do is Tuesday the 27th, Tuesday the 3rd and Tuesday the 10th and have
So the 3rd, the reason I didn't offer that is that's the day that everybody's voting. That's election day, the
Oh,
3rd.
Tuesday the 3rd. Okay.
So I didn't know if you wanted to meet that day. I mean, that's fine. We're working, but
No, actually, I think that's maybe a better day not to.
okay.
But what if we did candidate forum on Tuesday the 27th at 12:30?
Okay, let me go back to my October.
And
Sorry.
you don't have to
that's
set
right.
it up.
You're
Your chapter
right,
has it
right,
all
right.
set up. You don't even have to worry about it.
Okay.
We'll just invite people to
Everyone.
come.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, we'll just
Yeah.
send an invite out to all the faculty to join us for that Zoom presentation.
Okay.
Then we'll skip the 3rd, and then let's meet on Tuesday the 10th. And what
Okay.
time did you want to do?
I
We
said
could do that any time, but why don't we do that in the afternoon? Maybe we could have
we
Kermit do his that day.
I was going to say, if you want to do either or, that's open. So if you want 11 o'clock or 2 o'clock, that's up to you.
Let's do 2 because I know Kermit teaches in the morning, and I would like to. His topic is related to the one we just did and the one he did before this one.
Okay.
So let me talk to him. I got to write this down somewhere.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Let me put it on my little. And Charlotte's got it down. She's the keeper of the official AFC calendar.
November 10th. So
At
that
2.
means that before annual conference, we'd only have 2 more faculty roundtables.
Correct.
One on the 27th at 12:30 and one on November 10th at 2 p.m. And then we would have 3 weeks where we're doing pre-conference, conference,
Correct.
voting, other stuff.
Correct.
Okay, I can live with that.
And do we need to chat at all, you, myself, and Lori, about the semifinals, how you guys want to handle that, and then lead into the actual finals on that Thursday? Or
so we're going to do them live at the time that you've scheduled. Lori Bufka has indicated, I've been doing the update on the paperwork and stuff because she said she was unable. She sent me an email yesterday saying she's too overwhelmed. She just can't.
Going on. Okay.
So I'm just going to do it. I talked to I have a role at on my local chapter, and they're going to step in and take care of that until after conference. And then after conference, I'm going to step back up. So I'm just going to focus on getting that done. I've asked her to send me the last email she sent to the judges and the name of all of the semifinalists. So I have a list of all of the contestants, but only she did the paperwork and has the list of who the semifinalists are. I don't even know, that's part of her role.
Her role, right.
As soon as I get that information, I will send out the judging form. The dates you sent the information to Lori, I believe.